Imagine our planet without its people. Imagine that every single human being has simply disappeared. This isn't the story of how that might happen. It's the story of what happens to the world we leave behind. This time on Life After People, the fate of man's great attempts at immortality. The bodies left behind. Some mummified, some cryonically frozen. Will any of them achieve immortality, or will they be survived by other memorials to mankind? Take a look at the future of once crowded cities and ghost-like towns already devoid of man. Welcome to Earth, population 0. It's one day after people. Without humans to maintain them, power plants across the world start shutting down. Lights go out. Clocks stop. A race has begun to see who or what can survive the longest in a hostile world of life after people. Around the world, the mummies of many of Egypt's pharaohs lie not in tombs deep inside pyramids, but beneath the plexiglass of modern museums. One day after people, the electronic temperature and humidity controls that mimic the cool, dry environment where the mummies once resided shut down.
The bodies that have been left in the tombs in Egypt have lasted 3,000 years or more. If the conditions are just perfect for the body, I can't see why it couldn't last another 3,000 years. But if the conditions at the museum fail, the body would start to decay immediately. You have a high humidity, you have mold spores in the air at all times, so they would first probably be attacked by mold and bacteria.
How long can these mummies last? We shall see. One month after people. More than 100 bodies kept in suspended animation at the world's cryonics facilities are still in a deep freeze. According to experts, even a month-long power cut won't cause the bodies to thaw. They are kept at a temperature of minus 320 degrees Fahrenheit by liquid nitrogen, which doesn't rely on electricity to maintain its temperature. But there's a problem. Liquid nitrogen boils off slowly. In the time of humans, the supply had to be replenished every few weeks. With no one left to restock the crucial refrigerant, the bodies begin to warm up. Once they reach minus 184 degrees Fahrenheit, chemical reactions resume, and the natural processes of decomposition take over.
In the cells are enzymes and fluids. These break down quickly. The cell wall is broken down by enzymes. They leak out. As soon as the temperature started to go up, the body would just accelerate in the decaying process.
For these human beings, the bid for immortality is coming to an end. And should some future intelligence wish to recreate humans, they will find no help in the laboratories left behind by man. There are approximately 400,000 human embryos currently frozen in clinics in the United States alone. They, along with all the egg and sperm samples in the world, quickly decay as their supplies of liquid nitrogen run out. But man's DNA still has a chance for survival. 200 miles above the Earth, up in the International Space Station, rests a computer disk called the Immortality Drive. Delivered into orbit in October 2008, the Immortality Drive contains the digitized DNA information of a highly eclectic group, including physicist Stephen Hawking, comedian Stephen Colbert, and Playboy model Joe Garcia. It's the brainchild of Richard Garriott, a video game producer from Houston who thinks alien beings one day might use the DNA data to reconstruct an extinct humanity. The Immortality Drive may be man's best shot at preserving the species in a life after people, but can it really last forever? Another medium through which man has achieved immortality is art, creating images that have lasted centuries. But many masterpieces require protection in controlled environments. In the time of humans, Michelangelo's magnificent frescoes on the ceiling of the Vatican's Sistine Chapel were protected by more than 20 miles of pipes, pumps, valves, and wiring. To prevent the fresco plaster from absorbing too much water from the air, the humidity was kept at between 50 and 60%. Air filters removed even microscopic particles of dust. It was all controlled by computer. But without electricity, the system has closed down forever. But 3 months after people, the disappearance of humans is actually helping the frescoes. Without the annual hordes of 2 million tourists, there are no ascending currents of human body heat. The figures painted on the ceiling, including God and Adam, are safe, at least for now. Six months after people. While nature attacks some of the bodies and structures left behind, she preserves others. In the barren wastes of Ross Island, Antarctica, are the huts used in the early 20th century by explorers Robert Scott and Ernest Shackleton. Here, with an average temperature of 3 below zero, the ravages of decay have been slowed. Inside and out, the huts remain frozen in time.
With the severe cold in Antarctica, a lot of the insects that would gnaw away at the wood structure don't exist there. And the fungus, the mold, doesn't exist there.
Cans of beef from 1917 sit on the shelves.
These cans, they'll last 2-3 more centuries, easily.
Meat still hangs on metal hooks, appearing quite edible even after almost a century. In some cases, extreme cold has preserved flesh for thousands of years.
In the 1928 Explorers Club meeting in Paris, they ate mastodon. Some mastodon came up through the ice, and they got it, they cooked it up, and they served it at the dinner. And I had a friend there, and I asked him, I said, how did it taste? And he said, well, it tasted a lot like rotten meat. But it's been buried in the ice for 10,000 years, and it would. But it's edible.
While the Antarctic cold will preserve the explorers' huts for many years, it's the more temperate parts of the globe that most people once called home. Cities like Houston and Boston. where the artifacts of man face a much harsher fate. Sitting in Boston Harbor is one of the most famous ships in American history. The USS Constitution, first launched in 1797, is the world's oldest commissioned warship still afloat. During the War of 1812, cannonballs were seen bouncing off the ship's 25-inch thick wooden hull, earning her the nickname Old Ironsides. But even Old Ironsides is defenseless in this race to survive, along with most of what man has built. Nine months after People, the race to see what survives is becoming more intense. In Boston, a military relic is about to lose its final battle. The hull of Old Ironsides may be tough enough to repel a cannonball, but it can't withstand the constant infiltration of water.
Wooden ships leak. The wood starts leaking almost immediately. The wood will shrink, the wood will expand, the wood will rot.
In the time of humans, automatic bilge pumps drained 900 gallons of water a day from the ship. But those pumps stopped months ago. This flooding alone won't be enough to drag the ship underwater. It will take the Boston winter to do finally what enemy warships never could.
Waves might wash over the deck and might force it further under. In a world without people, maybe the Constitution would remain afloat for a year, maybe less.
Three years after People. The International Space Station still orbits above the Earth. But without constant recalibration from terrestrial stations or boosts from space shuttles, it loses 2 miles of altitude each month. As it drops from its original height of 200 miles to below 160 miles, the orbital decline accelerates, until it re-enters the atmosphere, where air and friction meet gravity, and the space station burns up. Incinerated in the descent. The final hope of reconstructing the human species. The digitized DNA of the Immortality Drive proves to be quite mortal after all. "5 years into a life after People." Weeds have transformed the historic streets of Boston.
If you just leave the gutters and rain spouts not maintained, plants will take root in little cracks in the brick and little cracks in the mortar.
Boston's Old North Church is under attack. It's here that lanterns warned Paul Revere of the British invasion in April 1775. Now the natural world has invaded and conquered.
If the windows blow out, you'll have rain coming in, you'll have pigeons coming in, you'll have animals coming in. You'll also have vines starting to grow, or a maple tree sending its shoots in here. They'll sprout up in the rotting wood.
It's 20 years since humans disappeared. Nature has conquered the subtropical city of Houston. The tallest building in Texas now looms over a city that is slowly reverting back to the swamp it once was. Once kept at a steady 72 degrees, Houston's great domed sports stadiums now swelter to 125 degrees in the summer. They've become enormous bat caves. The artificial grass of the Astrodome is swallowed up by reeds and muck. Feasting on insects, the bats make their own contribution to the new ecosystem, their excrement, or guano.
Guano has a lot of nutrients in it. And so what you have is you'll have insects that feed on fungus, bringing in predators that eat on those insects that eat the fungus.
"25 years without people have not been kind to the mummies housed in the world's great museums. With no one around to regulate heat and humidity, mold struck first, then insects.
Mites would probably be the first insect you would see destroying a mummified body. After the mites eat the decayed body, it would start to break down the fibers. It would start to turn to dust.
Great kings like Ramses II and Tutankhamun have been reduced to skeletons. When Lenin died in 1924, his body was given into the hands of skilled embalmers, and his corpse was preserved for decades in Moscow. The process was once a state secret, rumored to have involved repeated baths in formaldehyde, ethanol, and methanol. Caretakers were always on duty to protect the body, scrubbing away bacteria, closing up openings in the flesh, and lightening blemishes.
His body is treated with makeup so that he appears like he did 30 years ago. But the process of decay underneath that makeup and underneath that wax is still taking place. It can be slowed down, but the process of decay never stops.
But with no one to tend it, Lenin's body goes the way of the rotting pharaohs. The wooden steeple of Boston's 18th century Old North Church is on the verge of collapse.
The steeple, being taller, is going to be more susceptible to a big storm than the rest of the building. It would fall sooner.
The once guiding light of the American Revolution has been extinguished. 35 years after people is long enough to turn coastal cities like Boston into ghostly wrecks. How do we know this? It's a future that has already happened almost 7,000 miles from Boston. This island was the most densely populated place on Earth until man disappeared. "35 years after the disappearance of people, homes, offices, and factories are cracking and subsiding as nature takes over." it's a future that has already come to pass in one remote corner of the world. Several miles off the southwest coast of Japan, a forsaken island stands lifeless and decaying.
This island, as you can see, is a slab of concrete sitting in the middle of the ocean with high-rise buildings sprouting from it. Completely empty, no one living here anymore. No electricity, no vegetation, nothing.
Hashima Island was once a thriving coal mining town and home to thousands of people. Now its abandoned offices and residential buildings are literally exploding under nature's relentless hands.
The island has been left literally to the elements all these years, exposed completely. The wind is carrying all the seawater up into the buildings. The degradation is just startling and remarkable.
Because of the unsafe conditions, Hashima is strictly off-limits to visitors. In the 1890s, Japan's Mitsubishi Company began mining coal from the seafloor beneath Hashima. At its peak in 1959, the 15-acre island was home to more than 5,000 workers and their families, the highest recorded population density on Earth. In 1974, as Japan began favoring petroleum over coal, Mitsubishi closed the mine and relocated the entire population to the mainland. "35 years later, nothing remains but decayed buildings and ghostly memories."
What does the city look like after all the people are gone? This is the Hashima version of life after people. This isn't a war zone. It was one of the busiest thoroughfares on the island. There was once a row of stores along here with wooden shutters. All of the lumber is collapsed onto the ground. The concrete walling has fallen. The metal netting is strewn along the ground. It's the effects of 35 years of wind and rain. Once one of the busiest places on the island, now it's just completely silent.
These rooms once echoed with the laughter of children playing. Now, all that remains are the corroded, rusty remnants of their toys. Overgrown and forgotten, the school playground is now rusting scrap metal. Hashima is a laboratory for showing what happens to reinforced concrete in a savage environment. Every year, the typhoon season delivers rain and winds of up to 100 miles an hour, while huge ocean waves smash directly into buildings.
In the case of this building, we have an iron frame and steel reinforced parts. As you can see, the front part of this pillar is damaged, while the backside isn't. It tells you that the surface is damaged by salt water, wind, and rain.
Scientific studies of concrete core samples reveal that the buildings most exposed to the ocean had a salt content 15 times greater than the others. The concrete buildings themselves gave the island a warlike profile and even a new nickname, Battleship Island.
Hashima is called Battleship Island because from a distance it literally looks like the shape of a battleship. The similarity is so uncanny, in fact, that it was actually torpedoed during World War II by American submarines.
Dutoku Sakamoto lived on the island as a young boy. His former home is on the 9th floor of a building that once housed 300 families in tiny apartments.
This was our room that we used until 1974. There were 5 family members living in this house. And there was my private room and a balcony over there.
The wooden facades and balconies were quickly destroyed. The many passageways and stairs that connected the buildings are now falling apart.
This is the Jigokudan, the steps of hell, so named because they're so steep. The buildings of Hashima are high rises of up to 9 stories in height. And so people living on the island had to negotiate stairs like this on a daily basis. There wasn't a single elevator or escalator anywhere on the island, so you can see where the name comes from. Originally, Hashima was just a bare rock without any vegetation sitting in the middle of the ocean. And by artificial means, it was turned into a human community. But in reality, it's just that, a bare rock sitting in the middle of the ocean and lifeless, and it's gone back to lifelessness.
It's been 50 years since the last human voices echoed through the streets, alleys, and hallways of planet Earth. But the words of man haven't been completely silenced. After humans disappeared, tens of thousands of domestic parrots escaped into the wild and still retain the words and phrases taught to them by their vanished owners.
Parrots are considered one of the smartest creatures on Earth now, up with great apes and dolphins.
Some parrots have learned several hundred words and might keep that vocabulary even without humans to interact with.
A companion parrot that escaped into the wild might have a lifespan, say, of 60 years. Then it'd be very plausible that 50 years later you could still hear human noises in the wild.
So for now, some of mankind's words will survive. Time and nature are wearing away Boston's monumental Bunker Hill Bridge. The steel and concrete span is held up by 116 steel cables strung from 2 towers and required constant maintenance in the time of humans.
It's really painting the steel, making sure no corrosion exists, sweeping the debris off the bridge, cleaning out the drainage structures so plants don't grow and the water flows off of the bridge, and sealing the concrete with a moisture-penetrating sealer.
The cables are coated in a plastic piping to keep moisture off them. The plastic piping also protects them from another source of corrosion.
Bird droppings are amazingly corrosive to a wide range of building materials. It wasn't even fully recognized 20 or 30 years ago.
The waste product of pigeons and starlings contains high levels of ammonia and salt. Mixed with rainwater, the combination triggers a lethal electrochemical reaction. It was 20 years of bird droppings penetrating the steel of an 8-lane bridge in Minneapolis that contributed to its fatal collapse in 2007. After a century, weather and stress have cracked the protective plastic coating on the cables of the Bunker Hill Bridge. Stormwater, some of it mixed with acidic pigeon droppings, has penetrated to corrode the steel. One by one, the cables snap. When half have gone, those that remain can no longer support the weight of the roadway. Down the coast in New York, more than 200 years after she was given as a gift of friendship from the people of France to the people of America, the Statue of Liberty is still holding her torch high, the second to be held aloft by Lady Liberty. The original was replaced in the 1980s during a massive restoration project. Now, beneath her copper skin, only a few millimeters thick, her skeleton is beginning to disintegrate.
The steel straps that hold the copper to the steel framework would pull away, the rivets would pull away over a period of 100 to 200 years.
Her end has not yet come, but without humans, it soon will. In Houston, the domed stadiums have spent the last 100 years as subtropical paradises. In the time of humans, it cost an estimated $500,000 a year to maintain the Astrodome, the first domed baseball stadium in the world. After a century of neglect, the entire structure is cracking and crumbling. Finally, in great chunks, the 9,000-ton steel and lucite dome comes raining down. A 150 years after people leaves Boston looking like an untamed, neglected, and overgrown garden. In the time of humans, the best observation point in the city was from the top of the 60-story John Hancock Tower, the tallest building in New England. But the notorious New England weather has destroyed the building's outer skin. Corroding steel columns lead to a pancake collapse. The urban jungle is now just jungle. But former cities still echo with familiar words. Although these parrots have never interacted with humans, their ancestors did, and some remnants of human speech have been passed down to them. But our languages will not be immortal. While parrots can pass on human words to their chicks, it has no value for the survival of the species.
I would think the drop-off would be more than 90% per generation. 200 years after the last human, it would be highly unlikely to expect to hear human vocalization in parrots in the wild.
Over a period of 200 years, the tallest building in Texas has had its windows blown out by hurricanes and its insides corroded by rain.
You have to expect a hurricane in Houston, a good one, a big one, every 4 or 5 years. That's going to create a significant amount of damage to almost any tall building.
Now, the accumulated force of nature will strip the building to its bones.
The steel frame might still be there 200 years later. The rest of the building is gone.
Then, the steel frame itself will corrode and collapse. 1,600 miles away in New York Harbor, the Statue of Liberty's best chance for immortality might lie beneath the waves. "300 years after People, the Statue of Liberty suffers a fatal relapse of an old complaint: galvanic corrosion. Her torch-bearing right arm is the first to fall. Other parts quickly follow. Here on the ocean floor, these shattered symbols of hope become the fossils of the future.
The hand with a torch would, by that initial ballistic trajectory, embed itself, maybe up to half a meter, into the mud. And that impression may well stay, just in the way that footprints are preserved in mud and sand.
While one icon of humanity makes a bid for immortality on the ocean floor, the most famous ceiling in the world is barely hanging on. Half a millennium after People, Michelangelo's frescoes still look down from the Sistine ceiling, where they cover 12,000 square feet of surface. Even though all the frescoes have faded and cracked from changing temperature and humidity, on the wall depicting the Last Judgment, Michelangelo's heavenly sky has faded faster than other sections. The ultramarine pigment comes from lapis lazuli, mined in Tunisia. It was the most precious color in Renaissance art, but also one of the most delicate. Its blue color comes from 3 sulfur atoms and an electron protected by aluminium and silicon atoms. High humidity breaks apart the structure, allowing oxygen to mix with the sulfur, turning the blue to a yellowish gray. Throughout its history, people have tried to clean the frescoes and shore up the chapel itself. But after 5 centuries, the Last Judgment has come.
The walls would weaken. The vault of the roof would push the walls apart.
Exterior bracing buttresses fail, initiating a chain reaction.
Walls would collapse. They'd open like a book. The Sistine ceiling would not be there 1,000 years from now without people. Probably would not be there 500 years from now.
"10,000 years after People, almost all traces of mankind and its culture are buried beneath vegetation and sand.
10,000 years from now, there would certainly be some things that you would see, pyramids of Egypt perhaps, but very, very little of human existence would actually be recognizable in the absence of humans.
The planet has become warmer, even in the coldest places on Earth.
Even in these areas where Scott and Shackleton built their huts, we may well start to see an increase in plant life, possibly even insects, organisms that would begin to increase the rate at which decay would take away those structures. In 10,000 years, it's improbable that those huts will still be there.
In 10,000 years, the Earth itself will have buried most of man's cities. "100 million years after People." Dreaming of immortality, man tried to make his mark on the world. But those marks have been erased. In the end, what survives is not what people made. but the simple mineral compounds that made people.
We possess robust bones made out of calcium phosphate. It's as durable as the bones of dinosaurs. Our teeth are even more durable. The dentine and particularly the enamel, very hard to break down. So those parts of us will likely survive here and there.
This, then, is the final fate of humans. Along with the bridges they stretched across rivers and the buildings they piled up to the sky. Art and architecture, aspiration and achievement, all just fragments on the ground in a life after people.